Welcome to the Retail Tea Break. Each week, I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers, and product creators to decode the myths, share knowledge, and give you a better insight into the industry. My aim, as always, is to empower retailers and product creators to reach their potential. So, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and listen in. My name is Melissa Moore, and this is the Retail Tea Break. Today, I talk to a woman who creates beautiful hand-printed tiles and illustrated wall art, inspired by her Dutch-Irish heritage. She does all this successfully whilst juggling a full-time job. Alanna Plekkenpol, welcome to the Retail Tea Break.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's so lovely to be on.
Oh, I'm really delighted that you could take a bit of time out this week. We're in that crazy run up to Christmas, and it's just really great to have you on. And I think today's episode is probably going to shock a lot of people and also going to surprise a good few of them. So before we kick off, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, which is about 2 minutes, tell us a bit about you and the business.
Perfect. So I started my business under my name 5 years ago. I am half Dutch, half Irish. And basically, I really wanted to start my own small creative business. And I originally studied fashion design. I kind of knew quite quickly that that wasn't going to be fully my thing, but I loved doing illustrations in my notebook. And what I ended up doing more and more of towards the end of my year was to kind of be really inspired by my my Dutch heritage, especially because I was living in Ireland at the time. I love the combination, the really striking combination of the blue and white Dutch ceramic. And I was like, well, why don't we try bring those two things together? And now I am creating illustrations. I am hand printing them onto tiles, and I'm using the tiles as wall art. So it's nearly like an alternative way of having a framed print as such, but on a beautiful glossy tile where the colors are super vibrant. And my themes, I suppose, in my illustrations are all about adventure and about kind of that exciting feeling. I love them to be really storytelling with deep and rich colors in that, and still keeping a little hint of my Dutch heritage.
Oh, it sounds gorgeous. And they are, as you said, they're striking. They're such beautiful and unusual pieces, but actually that sits so well in any sort of home or as a gift. I have to say, I'm probably a little bit biased here. I love them. They're absolutely gorgeous. So it's great to be able to kind of talk to you about that. But behind all this, and I suppose the reason I wanted to get you on today, it's not your only job, is it?
No, and it has never been my only job. And it's funny. It's a real kind of it's a funny reaction that you get from people, because of course, I mean, on Instagram, people see the one thing and people see, you know, my brand, which Instagram has been absolutely incredible for me to help me grow my business. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The best way to speak a visual language, isn't it? Through pictures and through putting yourself out there. But it's probably a part that I never really mentioned, because it's more kind of personal to me, is that, yeah, I've always had a full-time job while doing this. And it's not because, you know, not for any other reason other than I just love the freedom of having a creative business, not being forced to be creative or forced to push out products, and really allowing my business to kind of grow as organically as it needed to, without pushing it too hard, seeing where things would go, really taking the time to take on board feedback and using that feedback then to inform new designs. And I've also kind of always picked a job that would really work alongside my own business. So what I do at the moment is I work for a company who provide marketing analytics and funding to e-commerce companies. And I get
incredibly timely now, coming on the back of COVID. Absolutely.
And actually the business itself was only founded in 2020. So it was really, I suppose, that the founders recognized an Irish company, and it started off quite small. It's growing very quickly now, but it's really started recognizing that need that I think I experienced, but I think an awful lot of people experience who have an e-commerce presence, where there's a gap in cash flow. And it's a funny thing because you have you create your product, or you buy in your product, depending on how you work. I create it, some people purchase it, then you have to market it. So all of this is, you have to fund up front. And then there's this gap between when you need all that funding and when it sells. And I suppose I grew up in Holland mostly, and the way I grew up was that funding is something to kind of like look down upon, nearly like you wouldn't necessarily want it, because you wouldn't want to get yourself into debt. But the way this works actually, I think, is really customer friendly. And what they do is they take a percentage of the daily sales. They're linked up to the back end of their Shopify website, or however they operate their website. They take a percentage of daily sales in order to pay that back, that funding. So it's actually a really friendly way of working with the founders, working with the e-commerce entrepreneurs. And for me, I'm just an account manager within that organization, but it means I get to chat to people like me every single day who run businesses, who run into the same challenges. And sometimes you come across incredible businesses, like one customer has organic baby clothes, and like there's all, some people make their own, some people buy it in. It's just fascinating, I find, how you can learn so much from other people and other people's businesses as well.
This is amazing, because I actually, do you know what, my next question was very much, I presume the day job helps feed into your art and your wall art business. But actually, it sounds like it's very much a two-way thing, that one's feeding it in one aspect. But I didn't necessarily realize that the creative business would be feeding into your day job as well. This sounds ideal.
I have to say, it's a lovely fit, and it's the only way really that I could see my business and a full-time job working hand in hand. I think if they were completely separate things, it'd be really hard. But actually, I find that I'm thinking more like a business owner when I'm talking to these people, because you're talking strategy, you're talking long-term planning, you're talking how marketing can inform. But also, in some ways, I feel that when it comes to marketing, when it comes to investing in marketing, it's funny because a huge amount of it, I feel, of the groundwork you have to do without paid advertising. And that's just, that's really, that, I suppose that's a personal opinion.
But it's finding the real customer, I presume, is what you're saying. You have to know who this authentic, ideal customer is. And the only way to do that is actually just put yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. When before COVID hit and all of that, it would be easier to go to a market and to meet people at trade shows, and to, like I've done Gifted before in the RDS. We did Dublin Flea a couple of years ago when it was still on, and it was an amazing opportunity every year around the busiest time of the year, around crazy Christmas time, to get to chat to customers and get that feedback. And you spend 11 months of the year in your studio focusing kind of by yourself, very hard to kind of, you're asking friends and family for feedback, but the real people that you need to get to know and you need to learn what they like is, of course, the customer. And when you don't have that necessarily, then you have to try and build that same community feeling and that same feedback online. And I remember thinking like that, I know you always heard about engagement and all that with your Instagram, and it's, there's a huge amount. I think there's a lot of blah blah around it, but
there is, absolutely. And I think these buzzwords are now being flung around the place.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But do people truly know what they mean? But also, are we doing it? Do you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. Are we actually doing it? And when we're asking them, are we asking them what they had for dinner last night, or are we actually getting valuable information, And
your background, I suppose, even prior to the current role, has been in this area. So again, it feels like your business is feeding the full-time job and vice versa all the way through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So before, I was always in retail. And there was actually in one role in particular, it was for a national retailer who worked with an awful lot of craft businesses. So I got to know a huge network of people that not only did I see them when I had my own brand at the trade show. So when we did Showcase, which is our annual kind of trade show with the Design and Crafts Council, you know, I'd have a stand and they'd have stands alongside me. And there were ones that they were like, did I know you through that shop, or do I know you because you have your own thing? And it's funny. And it was kind of like, I felt like I'm catfishing people nearly, but you know, it's a really interesting way to get to know people, but also these people have become my friends. You know, we've an amazing, really close group of friends now, and we all come across the same things, and especially all being small Irish craft businesses. It's been amazing, even over the past year, to like, with a WhatsApp group, and people throw questions into it, like, how has anyone managed this? Or, you know, or my packaging's delayed, or this has happened, or this has happened, you know, and you just getting that feedback and feeling like you're not alone either. Because when you do a business, when you kind of have a craft business on your own, it can be difficult to get that kind of feedback, you know, if you don't have someone to feed off necessarily who's in it as much as you are at that moment.
And I'm kind of seeing this more and more over the last few months, that's actually vital. It's not necessarily the professional help you can get out there, or even to some extent the funding. It's actually just having someone at like 4 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, when you have a question that's wrecking your head, that you can just put out there. And as you say, people have either been through it before, or do you know what, they'll just thrash it out with you because they understand the situation you're in. This is invaluable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you need it. And I think it's like, you have to, I feel extremely lucky to have met the guys that I've met through, mainly through Design and Crafts Council, through doing things like doing shows like Showcase, but also standing at markets. You know, I feel really lucky to have built up that group, because I do think that it's very hard to break into that if you don't have those contacts, if you don't have that. I mean, unless you know exactly what you're doing, but I don't think any of us ever really knew. And especially when it comes to planning your next step as a craft business, it's like, do I diversify? Do I grow my range? You know, am I appealing to all the customers that I could be appealing to? Do I just do wholesale, or do I want to just focus on my own e-commerce and my own retail? Or, you know, what are those kind of future plans, and what are you working towards? And when you have other people to bounce off, you know, it's interesting as some people have gone into very different directions with their work, but they actually discovered that their skills are really applicable to another industry, even necessarily, you know, especially like, I mean, I'm not one of these, but like I have a couple of friends who work with wood, for example, and they would have also been able to help out with shop displays and all these kind of things that just feed into being part of their business, still being part of their creative output, but just kind of going about it differently. And I think that diversification is really interesting.
And I think it's needed more now. I think the last 2 years has probably shaken a few people up, that maybe the industry isn't as solid or as reliable, even if that's in the short term, as we all thought it would. Because as you say, Showcase comes around every January, and then people buy, and then you make, and then it's almost kind of prep for Christmas, then it is Christmas, and then we go again. And we were all on this kind of nice, gentle cycle that kept going. And I think the last 2 years has really shaken it out of an awful lot of us. But that being said, where on earth are you finding the time to do all this? Because just listening to you there, that sounds like the average conversation I'd have with any maker, any crafter, who is literally giving every minute of their day to making, to running their business, to planning for what's coming next. But again, you're doing this, and yet kind of 35, 40 hours of your week are put aside for something else.
Yeah. No, it's very true. And I mean, it's a juggling act, 100%, but it's also, and I think this is really important to mention, like, as my business has grown, as my amount of stockists has grown, you know, as the orders have grown, like, my parents have been absolutely instrumental in getting involved, helping me with packing orders, you know, helping me send out invoices, staying on top of my inbox. I mean, they have been absolute superstars, and they never signed up for a family business, and I'm very conscious of that. But I just think that you just roll into, you know, it rolls into that, and it's wonderful when you have that support around you. And I think it's almost essential. Nearly everyone that I speak to either has a partner, has family. Like, it's such you're never in this for the money anyway. If you have a craft business, you do it for the love. And you know, the most important thing is just to keep it ticking over. And if that means that, you know, it's all hands on deck sometimes, then, you know, that's exactly what happens. But that is a huge reason why I can do what I do, and why I didn't have to scale back. Having said that, I did actually, earlier in 2021, I took out 3 months in between jobs, and I didn't have another job lined up now when this happened. But I took 3 months to rebuild my website, to re-strategize, and to refocus. And I was able to do that. And it was just the best thing ever, because for me, you know, I've been in it a few years. I set up the website in a way that worked for me a couple of years ago on, you know, a less than ideal e-commerce platform. I wasn't getting the insights that I needed. I was getting some orders through, but it wasn't really working for me. So allowing myself that time to really focus on it full time, without, I suppose, a necessary end date of when I would go back to full-time work, was really helpful. And that's something, you know, I really got stuck into my website. I built my own website, which I think was a brilliant learning curve. I nearly want to throw my laptop out the window some days, but
yep, in that.
You know, it's not even necessarily the difficulty of building it, because you've got these amazing platforms. Like I use Shopify for my new website, and it's very, like, it's quite intuitive when you set it up. But then it's like, but what if I want to do this, but then there's this rule, like say with discounts, for example, and these kind of things, how can I run multiple things alongside? How can I make that customer journey through my website as easy and as straightforward as possible? And that was like, I mean, that was mind boggling sometimes, because I was like, try to describe your very specific problem to Google to try and figure out what the solution is to this. It's so hard. So, you know, taking that 3 months definitely was great. But in the day-to-day running of things, like I check my emails before I go to work. And I can work from home at the moment as well, which is fantastic. I also have my studio at home. So that means that there's no commute in between my day job and my evening job anymore. You know, I can focus on my emails in the morning, get an hour in, then start my working day for my other job. And then after I finish that, I have dinner, I walk the dogs, and then the evening time is then to focus on my own business, and to both make products and also work on the strategy side of things. And it's incredible. But actually it really sounds like it's rewarding and it's working for you.
To pick up on something you said there, because I know it's something so many people are struggling with right now. So either they managed to get a grant, we'd say last year, so a Leo grant, an Enterprise Island grant, to throw together a website when COVID hit so that they could be selling. 95% of these websites are awful, as in they were thrown together in such a rush that, you know what, there was not very much thought gone into the process, apart from the fact you could click a button and someone could buy something. But you mentioned there that customer journey. So what was the process like, I suppose, of putting the website back together, and what influenced what you did?
Completely. So I suppose that the process was that something I wanted to understand more was that, and something that I really want to focus on, was knowing that my audience, now I don't have a particularly large following, especially not compared to some people on Instagram, but Instagram is my main traffic driver to my website. Part of that is completely my fault, because my business has my name. My name is Dutch, it's complicated, and it's not something people are going to type into their search bar necessarily. So that was one tricky part. So a lot of people would come through the visual channel, which is my Instagram, then click into my website and then potentially make a purchase, or approach me through that. But I just worried that with all the things going on with Facebook and Instagram, not that I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon, but I realized that really I didn't know an awful lot about my customers anymore. They lived as followers on my page who'd like a post when they saw something they liked, and then would go onto my website. But I had no control over how I could approach them, really, because I was dependent on this algorithm. And something that I heard a while ago, but only kind of hit home with me, is how much easier it is to retain a customer than it is to get a new customer.
And it is. There we go. And if you can retain that customer, they tend to keep coming back and they spend more. And it's something that I talk about all the time, but again, as you say, it doesn't always sink in.
No, it really doesn't. And for me as well, I was like, I was just focusing on putting posts out there in the world. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I actually can't, I don't know who my followers are. I can see a very basic kind of profile of who they are, but are they necessarily people who purchase as well? Does it reflect, does it work? So what I did was, by taking time to do my website, I prioritized getting a newsletter box up and running. So where people could fill in their email address to sign up for newsletters. Not that I had either time to put into a newsletter, but I was like, at least if I can start collecting a little bit of customer data, I will not be bombarding them. I said it as well in the message. I was like, I won't be bombarding you. I did reward these people with 10% discount off their first purchase to incentivize them to sign up. And that way I was like, if I ever lose my Instagram, I mean, say I've got hacked or something like that, you just don't know, then at least I would still have a way to reach out to people and to grow that part and to really understand. And it was a friend of mine actually who is very focused on customer care, who was telling me about this. She was like, that is like, customer care is top priority. It's not about trying to get as many customers in the door as possible. It's about, when you have them, how do you treat them? How do you, it's as if they're walking into a physical shop when they go onto your online.
Absolutely.
How do they feel when they go onto your website? How does your website navigate? Can they ask you a question? Is there an easy way to approach you if they have a question about a product? Are you giving all the right information? Then when they purchase, what does that look like for them afterwards? What are our own common frustrations with online shops, like not knowing where your order is, or, not having a full understanding of the timeline, not getting a full picture of the product, so that what you get might be completely different to what you'd expected. So all these things. And then even the follow-up emails of, like, I started putting reviews on my website, which I was nervous about because I have no control. They're automatically published, and, kind of like you're just shooting in the wild. And of course, sure, we do everything, and I do everything. And, when my parents when they helped me pack an order as well, like, everything is done in such a specific way that you'd like to think that people are going to be thrilled when they get the package. But of course, there's going to be different opinions. And I think it's so important to be open to that, and to open yourself up to those kind of things, like asking people really, what did they think of their order? And were they happy with the service that they received? Did everything arrive okay? Do we need to review shipping carriers if something broke? Do we need to review how we pack ourselves? I just think you can learn an awful lot from it.
You sound like you're very open to that, though. And I think that's definitely an issue that an awful lot of people right now don't want to know, or they're so head down focused on, I'm making money. But actually what you've really hit on there is that this is long term. This isn't making money right now or today. This is doing everything you can possibly do for your customer to keep them coming back.
Yeah. And it really, and especially as a business for myself, where I don't really invest in marketing too much. I don't really throw out too many sponsored posts, So it's a kind of thing where, I've been very lucky to, I've a wonderful, wonderful woman in my life called Claire Buckley. She runs a PR agency, Book and Hound, and she is absolutely incredible with the amount of tips she's given me from a PR perspective. So how to get featured from a PR side of things in the media, how to get people kind of talking about you in that side, where you're not paying for it. You're not paying to be featured, but actually there's people talking about your business, people talking about your story, and which in turn then brings new people into that kind of, into that scope and into your life. And she's extremely good at what she does, but it's the kind of thing, like, I've learned so much from her as well, that, it's not the people who push themselves the hardest constantly who are the ones who get talked about. It's the brands that have genuine stories to share, where, customers like to learn more about your business, but they also like you to be humble. And like you said, they like it when you're open to, customers like it when you're open to feedback, because that's the only way we can learn, and that's the only way we can move forward.
And I think these are the customers then that really appreciate the integrity you have. And these are the loyal customers. So again, these are the guys that will keep coming back. These are the people that long term will keep you afloat. So it's wonderful to hear that actually you were able to take that bit of time out, but you had a really clear goal in mind, even if you didn't have an end date, should I say, to those couple of months out of the business that you were working on it. But it sounds like it's been super beneficial for kind of the place, I suppose, you find yourself in now. And by the sounds of it, nothing's going to change anytime soon. You're really settled and happy kind of running these, or kind of working in one and running the other side by side. It definitely sounds like a long-term kind of plan for you.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's lovely because it's not that one is, of course, I love my own business. Of course, I love working on it. And it's my absolute, it's my absolute love. There's just no doubt about that. But having said that, I take a huge amount of pride in my day job as well. And I don't feel that those things can be, or should be kind of, shouldn't be able to work side by side, because
it is, let's be honest, it's frowned upon to a lot of people that you have this full-time job that isn't all encompassing to your, spending 23.5 hours a day working on your passion project. But you love what you do, regardless of who you're almost working for.
Exactly. And it's lovely. I think when you find an employer who also accepts that in you, and who's actually, they've been incredibly supportive. I got a new wholesale stockist there the other day, and someone gave me a big shout out in front of the whole company's Slack channel. And I was just like, it's so nice. But it's also, it's that kind of level of support is definitely something that you need, because I think it's easy to kind of want to hide one side of you. But at the end, if you can do both, why not do it? And if that's what you're into, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, of course. And for some people, they want to go all in. But in my case, I was looking, I'm 28 now. I was 23 when I set up my business. I was looking into all the things that, people my age were looking at. I was looking at potentially getting a mortgage at some stage, which in Ireland is notoriously difficult. I was looking at kind of these life plans alongside my own dreams of having a craft business. And, sometimes it's sad to think that way, but they don't always, unfortunately, it doesn't always mean that when you have your own business that you'll have banks that will work with you on that for things like mortgage applications, or, you also need to live. And I think it's really important that I would rather have a full-time job give me the freedom so that I can spend all my other time focused on my job, on my creative business, rather than worrying about things like money coming in. It really isn't a priority for me, and it never has been. And I think it's the only way to succeed in a craft business is if your end game is not to think that you're going to make lots of money, because that's just not how it works.
No, and again, I think this is something that's frowned upon. It's not talked about either. It's really hard work for sometimes very little financial reward. Being as successful as we say as you are, you're seen out and about there in some of the best retailers that we have. You're seen as having a very successful business, but you're so honest when you say it isn't easy. You're very lucky to have that support structure, which again isn't talked about, but also financially, you're not unfortunately making the millions yet to kind of allow you do lots of other things with this craft business.
Yeah, exactly. Nor at the time. So, but I think if you can just manage to operate at a level where you're happy, especially with when you're doing something creative, because when I'm not in a good headspace, I don't produce my best work. And I think that counts for whether it's a creative business or anyone in any job. If you're not in that good spot for yourself, where you feel balanced, where all the kind of different cogs and elements of your life are kind of working together, it's very hard to be creative. It's very hard to have a good output, because you're not able to take a bird's eye view anymore. You're so focused on the details. And sometimes you could sit there for hours being really stressed, when actually you could be you could be doing a day job that's completely different. You're concerning yourself with someone else's business, and then actually take those hours at the end of the day to really focus and think, okay, so this and this happened today. but actually these are the things that I need to focus on for my business now. And I find you get an awful lot more done in a small space of time when you can get yourself into a good headspace like that.
That's fascinating. So it's giving you clarity, but actually by the sounds of it, it's making you more efficient.
Definitely.
Wow.
I'm a terrible procrastinator.
Oh, you and me both, girl. These are things I think we just presume that people who have full-time jobs who are creative need the cash flow, kind of need to be doing this, then don't have the time. But actually, it never even dawned on me that instead of forcing yourself to be creative, you're actually allowing yourself the time to be creative, knowing that you have to do certain things at a certain time of the week or the day. Yeah. And actually you enjoy it then when you do sit down to be creative. You're actually really enjoying that process.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I actually learned in college. So I did the first 3 years of my college degree, I did in a very stressful environment. I actually changed college for my final year. And for me, in those first 3 years, I never produced any work that I could now look back on and say, I'm really proud of that. Whereas in that final year, I had, for the first time, I was able to, the environment was completely different. So I changed colleges for my final year. I went to NCAD for my last year, and that was the best move because I had an amazing tutor, Nigel, who was extremely supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And this freedom was just, it was amazing. Like in the first 3 years of uni, I was pushed into this box of this is what the tutors expect you to do, and your peers are your competition, and it was high stress environment all the time. And then suddenly I went to this final year, which should have been the most stressful, and I just had a tutor say, just experiment and just work out what you like and then focus on that, and then we can build on that. And he was very much a kind of nearly like a cheerleader on the sideline, and because of that I was able to focus much better. For the first time I was able to have a part-time job in retail, actually. Which I loved. I always wanted to have a part-time job in retail at that age, and it was amazing. I worked 20 hours a week at the time. I did my full-time college course. I did my final year in college, and I ended up with a collection that I was proud of and work that I was proud of. It was so much more creative than I convinced myself that I wasn't creative because I was in a high pressure, high stress environment. I just thought I thought I wasn't good enough. And when you're told that by, when the people around you, especially tutors in colleges, have such a responsibility to kind of cushion you a little bit and help guide you.
They're to nurture, not to knock it out of you, which by the sounds of it was happening in those first 3 years.
Yeah. And that was tough. But I think that's when I really found out I don't need to be. I was doing all-nighters for those first 3 years and I wasn't getting anything out of it. I wasn't even producing half as good of work as I was in that final year. So I think when you take yourself out of that stressful environment, and when you take yourself out of that worry, especially worry, because that can consume us, then actually you can get yourself to a really positive state of mind where in probably a third of the time you can do so much more because you're forced to be focused in that time. You can't sit around and procrastinate because you've got other places to be and other things to do. And I just found that when I learned that at that moment, and I was like, God, you can do different things. You can have your attention split and be good at things, or not necessarily good, but just for yourself, have that feeling of feeling content with your output rather than just feeling worried all the time. And
it's genuinely fascinating. And I don't think I realized that that's the way this conversation would have gone, that actually having almost 2 businesses in your life is making you more efficient. It's making you happier. It's actually giving you the support and the time to do 2 things very well. It sounds incredibly positive, which is it's wonderful. It's really good to hear because again, it's not talked about, it's frowned upon, but actually you're someone that's doing both things incredibly successfully. So with all that said and done, what on earth is coming up for you next? What's kind of the next 6 months looking like for you?
So there's a few things coming up. I think my growing my website and kind of changing that around. And you know, I do see huge potential within growing kind of even things like the newsletter side of the business, like little things like that, where it's marketing, but it's more investing time into it rather than money. I still want to continue down that path. I don't think I've finished kind of growing on that level yet. So that's something I'd love. I will be bringing out more designs as well. We have a trade show, a physical real life trade show coming up in January, which is
it's
exciting seeing people back for the first time in 2 years. And then for my own life, I'm actually expecting a baby. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So I am due on the 1st of March. So I have, you know, and like that, I think
it's a third job to fit into your business.
Exactly. And you know, it's just been the greatest honor and the happiest time for, you know, it's just I just think it's amazing what our bodies are capable of. And I'm just like, I'm not worried about combining these things, because I know that I'm not going to take time out of my own business. But at the same time, I know that, for example, things I'm doing now is like I'm working on creating more stock in advance, you know, these kind of things, because I'm conscious that I will have to split my time over another thing as well. But having said that, I don't see that these things necessarily have to change the way, you know, the way my business operates, the way my life kind of operates, and how all these things work together. So they're kind of, that's obviously, that's quite a big thing. And that's, yeah, it's just, I hope to just continue, hopefully a steady growth that I've been really lucky to experience in my own business. And, you know, have more designs.
Amazing. What a gorgeous positive note to end today's podcast episode. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and even subscribe to the Retail Tea Break. Leave us a comment. There's so much in today's episode that I'm sure is going to resonate with an awful lot of people out there. So for the meantime, Alanna, thank you so much for joining me today, and best of luck with everything for 2022.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.